Welcome back to Whence Came You, a Masonic podcast featuring research papers and discussions related to Freemasonry. Here's your host, Brother Robert Johnson.
All right, this is episode 296. Thanks for coming back. This week, we've got a 10 for 10 with a brother from right here in good old Illinois. I didn't know that until we started talking, which was pretty interesting. So our Illinois brethren will have a little something special as far as understanding goes within this episode. We talked a little bit about a few concepts that might be foreign to some other jurisdictions. One is the Grand Master's Award of Excellence, which is a series of planks that we can meet or events that we can schedule and we get points for them. We also talked about a few other things. So if you have questions and you'd like some clarification on anything that we talked about, go ahead and shoot me an email at wcypodcast@gmail.com. In the news, we are getting closer to 300 years of Freemasonry. The Masonic Roundtable, myself included, we have a great event planned for June 23rd, June 24th. We've got some really amazing things happening. So if you'd like to know more, please head on over to the masonicroundtable.com/300 for more information. Get your tickets as soon as possible. We have over 100 brethren registered already. Be part of the biggest celebration around. So I've got a few additional prepared topics for some of the talks that we do. Of course, I still do the Masonic Pub Crawl, which is Freemasonry in America and its colonial tavern beginnings. I do a talk on the word called the Tetragrammaton. The presentation is pretty much all about the lost word, string theory, and mythology. Of course, I do an Esoterics 101, which is all about the beginning concepts of the deeper aspects of Freemasonry. So if you want to expose your lodge gently to a whole new world, this is a presentation for you. I do another one that is brand new called Connecting Masons Through Technology. I do a presentation on Memphis Mizraim. A lot of guys have a lot of questions about that, so we put together something really special for that. I do another one called Finding the Truth. It's how to do Masonic research. So in this one, I focus on what you need to do to establish yourself as an authority in Masonic writing. And a new one that's coming out, and it will be premiered very soon. I'll tell you about that in a second, called Long Been in Darkness, an exploration of traditional candidate preparation. Now, this has nothing to do with TO, so I want you to get that out of your head. It's something totally different, but it is very interesting. So, that said, June 7th, I'm going to be in Jefferson City, Missouri, at the York Rite Grand Sessions, presenting the word over lunch on Wednesday. June 8th, the very next day, I'll be in Hesperia Lodge doing Connecting Masons Through Technology. On June 13th, I'll be at Wheeling, Illinois, DC Krieger to be exact, and that's where myself, Brother Scott Duvall, and Brother Spence Haman are going to put something really special together. We've put it together. It's called Long Been in Darkness, an exploration of traditional candidate preparation. Now, along with our presentation, we've got a great friend of ours, a great brother, Ray Espiritu, who's going to actually be there, and he does a great meditation session for us. So we're going to have him come out and do that as well. That starts at 7 o'clock. Again, that's DC Krieger Lodge number 81 in Wheeling, Illinois. You're going to want to be there. June 23rd, June 24th. That is, of course, 300 Freemasonry's Legacy, Freemasonry's Future. That's going to be in Alexandria, Virginia. And if you can get your tickets now, that's better. The more tickets we sell now, the more things we can add on. And we have added a ton of stuff since, and it's not even posted on the site yet. I know that sounds like a blank check, but it really is amazing. We've got at least 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 things that are pretty epic that you're going to experience, see, get when you get there that you didn't know walking in. It'll be really cool. And with that, let's get right into this week's interview with Andrew Oxford, Worshipful Master, down at the Cary Grove Temple in Illinois. All right, everybody, we're back with another 10 for 10, and we have another great guest on this week. So, brother, if you wouldn't mind, I should say worshipful brother, if you wouldn't mind giving us your name, lodge name and number, and under whose jurisdiction your lodge is under.
Thank you, brother. My name is Andrew Oxford. I am Worshipful Master of Cary Grove Lodge, number 1157 in Cary, Illinois, and that's under the Grand Lodge of Illinois.
Awesome. I am also under the Grand Lodge of Illinois. Good Grand Lodge. High five. Same team.
Yep. Yeah.
First of all, I guess I would just like to, again, welcome you to the program, saying thanks again for coming on. I know we pushed this back a little bit, but we're back on schedule, and I really appreciate you making the time to come on.
It's my pleasure.
So I guess we'll just get right into it. We have 10 questions, and we'll just go right into it. Your last question is from the last Worshipful Master who we interviewed, and that would have been Brother Steve Higdon. So your first question is, if you could make one requirement or get rid of a requirement in order to be made a Mason, what would it be?
Oh, that's an interesting question. I think a requirement that I would get rid of, this might be somewhat controversial, is to belief in God.
That's something that is very interesting, right? I mean, it doesn't meet the paradigm of a lodge sometimes, and so they might consider what you believe, even if it's not like in, say, I'll use the most common example, the Judeo-Christian God or an Abrahamic faith. They don't consider it, like they wouldn't consider you believing in God because it's not the one that they understand. Or I think that's a really interesting point. But again, also, every once in a while I'll see these articles online where somebody will take the oath of an office somewhere. They will not swear to God or whatever, and it always makes the news because it's this big thing, but I'm not really sure why that is sometimes. Good answer.
Well, I think that it's possible for someone to be held to an oath without a belief in God, and I know a lot of good men who don't believe in God, and a lot of men who question it. I think that Masonry has something to offer them as well, and although obviously Masonry, as we practice it, is heavily informed by the Judeo-Christian system and work ethic, and ethic, of course. I think if we want to be more inclusive, we'll kind of, if we would de-emphasize that part and sort of emphasize the brotherhood and the fellowship, it might serve us better in the future.
All right. So next question: how long should a secretary of a lodge be in place? And I'm sure you're aware, here in Illinois, we've got secretaries who, and this may be the case all over the United States. My last secretary was in place for, I think, 25, 30, 26 years before I took over for him. I heard another guy say that he was secretary for 30-something years, and the only reason he stopped being the secretary was because they told him he couldn't send in snail mail anymore. He had to use the electronic version, so he totally quit.
Well, I mean, there's something to be said for longevity in that position, because if you've got a good one, keep them in place. Because we had a longtime secretary at Cary Grove, and he became very ill, and he just kind of disappeared. We didn't know what was happening. He wasn't answering email. He wasn't answering phone messages. And come to find out, months later, he was extremely ill, and it was detrimental to the lodge as a whole. We were running blind. Without your secretary, it's like, in a vacuum almost. And so we got in a good secretary who came in, and he had to clean all that stuff up. And we wanted him to stick around, but he could only do a year in the job. And so when I came to the East, I had to select another secretary. And the gentleman I picked, a past master, turned out to not be up to the task, and that has made things difficult over the last year in some ways, although we've worked around it a bit, and we've gotten some help from past masters and other friends. But having a good secretary is really, really important to running your lodge. If you've got a good one who wants to stay in the position, I don't see any reason why you can't continue to have that person hold that chair. But they've got to want it, right? And they've got to be competent at it. If it gets to a point where they've been in the chair so long that they no longer really have any kind of enthusiasm for it and any spirit for the job, and they start phoning it in, well, that's time for them to go. So obviously, I'd love to have a secretary for life, basically.
Sure.
Who's good, but also, by the same token, I've had one of those who disappeared off the face of the earth. And
to think about it in terms of if they're good and they're doing good things and they want to be there as long as they want, right?
Right, exactly.
So what will your greatest success be while in the East?
Well, I think for me, it's going to be putting emphasis back on the Lodge achieving the Grand Master's Award of Excellence. We sort of got away from that, and that was my whole program for this year. And Cary Grove, it looks like we are most likely going to achieve that. I think we've got all our planks together, and it was extremely important. I mean, this is the number one important thing for me as worshipful master, was to make sure we got that award. I had my wardens with me at the annual communication back in October, and Sunday morning, they've got all the masters coming down and collecting the certificates for the Grand Master's Award of Excellence. And I said to my wardens, I said, we are never going to sit up here again while they're down there. We're going to be down there. And they looked at me, and you could see it in their eyes that they were fully in on that concept. And that's when I knew that we had the makings to achieve that. And the second thing about the Grand Master's Award of Excellence, it is kind of its own award in and of itself, because if you work hard and try to accomplish that, even if you don't get there, you're going to do some things over the course of the year that you might not otherwise have done. So you're going to grow as a lodge and as Masons, and you're going to have all this stuff that you've done, and that's all just going to add to things. It adds to that common stock of understanding, as we call it, and it's its own reward in and of itself, even if you don't achieve it. And I think it's a brilliant piece of programming by the Grand Lodge of Illinois to have this Grand Master's Award of Excellence, and it really gives you something to focus your lodge around and something to focus your year around. It's like almost give you the program right there, and all you got to do is go and do that. It's varied enough that you can fit it to your lodge. What your lodge does well and what your lodge doesn't do so well, you can focus it that way. So I think it's a brilliant program, and every lodge in the state should make their best attempt to earn that every year.
I really agree. There was a time in my past when lodge members would say things like, oh, what do we need to call out our successes for? We don't need an award and blah, 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 blah. But I think it kind of comes from an odd place, and pardon me, like if you're one of these guys who thinks that way, but I think that's a little bit ignorant on our part, because really, like you just said, if you take the time to read what is required, for those people who are listening and they don't know what this is, imagine a program and it has planks and points, and you will get points or you'll get a plank if you complete certain things, like have an open house, have a community event, do a blood drive, do this, do that, and you really get some interesting things happening in your lodge, and you'll notice the dynamic kind of shifting in your lodge. And I think that ignorance, like I was talking about, where you might not read that award of excellence and you just think it's some thing that's completely different than what it is. And it really is a great plan. Like if you don't have a lodge plan, you should have an annual plan, right? But I mean, if you don't have that annual plan, that award of excellence is a pretty good place to start. Like you could say, hey, on this date, let's do this. On these dates, we're going to visit these 3 lodges and get a point for it. And it's a really good plan. And it makes me proud and happy to hear you say like that was one of the things that you really shot for, because the Grand Master's Award of Excellence means your lodge is doing stuff, and that's really good. So.
Exactly. And an interesting thing happened when I sat up in the East and I said, okay, this is going to be our program. All of a sudden, ideas started flowing in from the brothers about things we could do.
Right.
And several things came up along the way that we incorporated into our program that I hadn't even thought of. So you get the juices flowing, and everybody, when everybody buys into it, then it just starts happening, and that's what's happened here, and it's just been awesome. Love it. I love what's happened at Cary Grove this year. I'm so proud of it.
One of the things you alluded to in your answer was, it kind of brings out the best in your lodge. But what would you say what's one thing you wish your lodge did a little better?
Oh, well, I think our lodge can do a little better with in-tender program, for one thing. We haven't really focused on that because we haven't had a lot of incoming petitioners over the last few years, which has really been detrimental to the lodge in a lot of ways. Once we get them in, we don't really have any kind of, we're not using an intender program that I think is really particularly effective. It just sort of kind of leaves them person there to on their own do something. I mean, we do assign an intender, and we try to keep up with them and say, hey, how are you doing? How's that catechism coming? You want some help with that? And that works, to someone who's kind of motivated.
Right.
But if they're struggling with it, I think that it's not enough. So I think, there's one thing I would like to incorporate from another lodge is they actually have a class system. And while I may not want to take their system in its entirety, I have some ideas about how to adapt it to Cary that I would like to do in the years coming. So we'll see about that. I think a lot of the brothers agree that we could do a little more with the intender system. Take it and mold it for our needs, because you got to kind of tweak it a little bit, because you got to understand your own lodge and your community that you're working with, and the kind of brothers that you have in your group there. What's going to work the best with that. And I have some ideas that I'm very interested in. One being doing a class about memorization. I've already given a presentation on that at a lodge I belong to plurally, locally, and I want to develop that more fully to try to take some of the anxiety out of that, and maybe we'll get a little more energy put into those catechisms.
That sounds great. Yeah, great. How many lapel pins should you wear? Points in or points out? And should we raise the dues? I'm totally kidding. On a serious note, does your lodge do any fundraising? And if so, what is your most successful one? And what makes it successful?
Well, yes, we do fundraising. We're starting to kind of expand that a little bit. We have a traditional one that we do every year. We sell pop at a fireworks event in Foxford. Foxford Grove is kind of a unique community, and it puts the Grove in Cary Grove, as it were. And they have the Saturday after the 4th of July, they have their fireworks show. It's always a Saturday night, so we get out there and we sell pop. Now, we're not making a lot of money off that, to be honest. It's certainly not enough to sustain the lodge for a year, I can tell you that much.
Right.
We're starting to work with the JCs in Cary, and we had an inn there, and they've pulled us into this event they have each year. They're sort of revitalized the old Cary Days concept, which is the kind of the village fair. Every village in Illinois has one of these things every summer. And Cary's kind of fell by the wayside during the Great Recession. So they're kind of the JCs are trying to revive this. And since we have an inn with the JCs, one of our officers was a national officer with the JCs and has been an officer with the local JCs. So we get in on this thing, and we have first dibs to do it. So we did it last year, and we actually made a little bit of money off of it. Still nowhere near enough to make a profit for the year for the lodge, but it did show some promise, and they actually expanded the format and gave us a little more exclusivity as far as what we sell, because we didn't have that last year. We were getting creamed by the booth next door to us that could sell pop and take debit cards.
Uh-huh.
And we were like, hey, we were supposed to have the pop concession. Like, well, not entirely. But.
So I guess question though, I mean, speaking to some of the success then, I mean, at least you guys are out there in the community and people see you. That's got to be worth something too. Maybe not monetarily, but intrinsically worth something.
Well, we did pick up a member a few years ago at the fireworks, because I was sitting there. It was just after I'd been raised a Master Mason. I was sitting there selling the pop. I was also involved in martial arts in Foxford Grove. I took karate at the dojo, Shotokan karate, and I recognized one of the instructors.
Oh, okay.
And he came over to see me at the booth, and we started talking. And his dad was a Mason. I'm like, hey, well, why don't you come to the meeting and see if you're interested in joining? And so, sure enough, he joined. But he hasn't been a very active member, but he did join, and he's still a member. So
that's awesome. This is kind of an interesting question, and it's a hard one to answer sometimes, because I think it plays with our emotion, with our friends, kind of, in that progressive lines in the lodge. Would you say they're good or bad? And the reason I say it's difficult, right, is because somebody tends to work hard all their life to, or for 3 or 4 years to get up through, and then maybe they're not ready to go to the East, or maybe they're not a competent person for the East. Do you still just elect them in, or how do you feel about the progressive line versus an elected line?
I see the progressive line as kind of a necessary evil. When you're at a point when you don't have enough participating members to have an actual election, it's but you got to fill the chairs, which is something I think that is a wise decision by the Grand Lodge of Illinois. Is if you can't fill all these specific chairs, you might not be able to keep your charter.
Right.
So that kind of it's a process that thins out some of the lodges that don't become inviolable. But so obviously the progressive line becomes something that you utilize to make sure you get your officers filled, obviously, which you have to do. And it also is, in a way, it's kind of beneficial because you get to progress through the chairs. And sometimes circumstances will cause you to make some alterations here and there. And this is so, and I don't know how you did this again, because this is extremely topical to my lodge right now. We're actually about to transition. My year in the East is almost over, and we had our annual meeting last night, and we elected a new set of officers for the coming year. And as I mentioned before, we haven't had a whole lot of new blood coming in, and we've lost a few key members due to those things in life, like your job. You get a promotion, but it's the second shift, so you can't go to lodge anymore. Right. Well, you have to. It's tough, but you have to divide your time wisely, as the gauge teaches us. We lost a significant amount of membership, and we didn't have any new blood coming in, so we didn't really have anyone to fill like chairs underneath us. So we devised this rotation for the DS officers. So as I'm moving out of the East, the senior warden's moving into the East. I'm actually going to the South, and the junior warden is going to the West. So we had a younger member, and a gentleman who's full of potential, and he had been junior deacon when I was senior warden, and I wanted him to move up to senior deacon when I went into the East. But at that time, he thought he was going to move out of the state, and so he declined to move up to the chair. But he turns out he didn't go. He didn't move out of state. He was staying in state. And I made him senior steward later on when we discovered, it was because I left those chairs open, and it just sometimes happens. And so I put him in at senior steward and went through the year. And also, I was working so hard to try to get this guy involved because I think there was so much potential in him. And I asked him to study the part for first fellowcraft. And we had a third degree at the end of April. He performed the role beautifully. So as we're getting ready to shift over, he gets the idea that, well, maybe he can just skip over senior deacon and become junior warden. And we're like, well, here's the thing. We really don't think you're ready to go to junior warden. I don't think you quite grasp what it means, to go up on that dais. And I think you need to follow the development plan we wanted for you, which is to step up into the senior deacon. We offered him senior deacon again. He didn't want it.
Okay.
He wanted to go to junior warden. We're like, well, this is not going to happen because you're not ready and you don't fully understand the position yet. I really want to develop you into that position because I want to see you go into the East someday. But so now he's kind of disgruntled and we can't seem to talk any sense into him. So he's talking demit. So
yikes. Yeah, I've seen it happen before, and I've even had friends where they were ready to go into an office, and maybe that didn't happen, and they've gotten pretty upset about it. And it's kind of hard, right? I think it's one of the things that we learn, it's just like we should probably really not have these huge egos that we have. And one of the things that's hard is when somebody says to you, I think you'd be great for that chair, but not yet. You're just not developed enough into an officer to do that. And yes, we could put you in there, and sure, you could fly by the seat of your pants and you probably get it done, but would it just get done, or would it be done really, really well? How does it going to fit into the plan? Are you going to, take it on, and really own it? Or is it you're going to take it on and you're going to try to own it, but you're going to also be learning as you go, when you could be learning year over year? I mean, I went from every chair for a year from junior steward up, so it was a long road for me. And I remember there was a time when they said, we're thinking about moving you up. And I said, well, I don't know about that, because I'm not ready for that yet. You want that time to develop. And I think my year in the East was better because I did all those years. But great points.
Yeah, and we get you made the point about egos, and everybody's got egos. It seems like we dealt with a lot of egos in Lodge this year, but it's pretty much par for the course when you get passionate people. And what I was looking for in this gentleman was some of that passion, like when I was telling you about Springfield, and talked to my warden and said, we're not going to be on the sidelines anymore. I wanted to see some of that passion from him, and it just wasn't there. Maybe it could be developed, maybe it could be brought out in him, but it's just going to take a while. And I hope he sticks around, reconsiders this thing, because I don't see that he's going to be able to go somewhere else and go say, oh yeah, hey, the South is open, why don't you just hop up there?
Right.
So I don't know if that's what's in his mind or not. I don't know, but he could be developed. But I don't think he's going to get what he wants just by going somewhere else. I've got a good idea of the character of our district, the 3rd Northern. So, but so obviously back to the main point. So the progressive line is good for developing officers, but I think if as time goes on, if we start seeing the ranks filling in again, where we can actually have some contested elections, that'll also be good, because there'll be quality men you can choose from.
Right.
And hopefully, nothing would get too heated, but
right.
So either way.
All right, kind of a subjective question here. To you, what is the most important working tool? What means the most to you, and when you think about that?
Yeah, that's a good question. I can't say it's one I've ever really thought about a lot, but I would have to say, I'll say the trowel. I think it's important, to spread that cement. That's what it's all about, really, when you get down to it. The love that you feel between the brethren in the lodge is what holds you together. And when that starts to erode, and everyone's more, what can I get for me, then you start to lose that cohesiveness as a lodge. I always try to emphasize that we have to try to put aside our differences and try to see our similarities more often, because I hear a lot of times, I hear guys say, I don't like so-and-so, and I don't like that guy. And I'm like, well, we're all supposed to be brothers. We're supposed to try to like each other, try to find something about each other to like. I had an older gentleman in the lodge, past master, as I was coming to the east, and he had a particular habit of running down a deceased past master. And I set him aside. I said, look, that man was a friend of mine, and now he's gone, and we're not going to speak ill of him anymore. We're going to try to find, we're not going to speak ill of each other. We're going to try to find things that unite us, not things that divide us. So it's all about, I'm a big believer in unity. When I saw the warden's eyes in Springfield, and I knew that we were united in purpose this year under getting that award of excellence, and I felt that, and we have been doing great stuff this year in a number of different areas, and it just feels, it's such a powerful moment when that happens. It feels like you can do anything, you can accomplish anything, and I think that's what it's all about. To achieve that feeling, to achieve that unity is reward is, not a lapel pin or a certificate or a fancy apron. It's that feeling of unity and that feeling of purpose. And if you can get that, well, then you've done it. You found out what it's all about.
That's great. Awesome answer. Tell me one thing that you would tell yourself as a young Mason now that you're virtually a past master.
Well, I came into Masonry pretty motivated. My grandfather had been a Mason, and he was downstate, down around Anna. I don't know if you know where Anna is.
I do.
Yeah, so he'd been there, and he was old school. He was old school Mason, so he didn't talk about anything. He was also in Oxford, which an Oxford man, which I am myself, obviously, and we have a reputation for not talking about much either. It's just, we come by that naturally. The relationship between him and his sons, he had 4 sons. My father was the third, and they had such a relationship with him as a kind of borderline admiration and want to get out from under his thumb kind of thing, that they didn't know to ask or anything like that. He never talked about it. So they didn't become Masons, but my uncle did. My aunt's husband became a Mason, and his son became a Mason, so they kind of kept that line going a little bit. But I never knew him because he died when I was a toddler.
Oh, wow.
And so when I'm sitting in lodge and I'm looking at the altar, and I know, I didn't get to know him. I don't know if I don't even saw me. I was born in 1966. He died in 1968. We actually were living in Southern California at the time. And so I look down at that altar and I go, he knelt there. Not at that particular one. He knelt there. He said these words. He listened to these words that we're saying. And that's my connection to him. And that was the thing I would tell myself when I was starting out. I said, this is a connection. I mean, it's 300 years now that Masonry has been going forward. And obviously, since the start, since the United States was colonies, Masonry has been there, influencing American life and how America has developed as a country. And the principles therein seem to stem a lot from the practice of Freemasonry, which has been a kind of a unique thing. And so when I look at that, I would say, tell myself as a young Mason, this is about more than just yourself. This is you becoming part of something that's much larger and much more involved than you are. And you can make difference this way in the world. I may not be elected president of the United States or even become a rich man or influential or powerful, but I, as a Mason, can carry on that tradition and can model those principles in my life and pay it forward to the next generations so that they will take those principles on forward in the future, and thus, hopefully, for the betterment of humanity, and Masonry will continue to exist on to the future as the basis of a society that is considering its own emotional state as important, about protecting each other, loving each other, and unity of purpose of humanity.
Interesting thought. Tell yourself that this is bigger than you. You hear a lot of guys say, I joined because I wanted to do something bigger than myself. But how much did we really think about that impact? And it sounds like you've really put some good thought into it.
And if I can get, a few thousand lapel pins upon the way, that's just bonus.
For sure.
As my friend, our district deputy Grand Master over here, Chad Lasik, says, he'd kill his mother for a lapel pin.
I know Chad. He's a good guy.
I love Chad.
He's such a really interesting individual. I had some really good talks with him at the Valley of Chicago. Your last question here comes from Steve Higdon. This is question number 10. I'll just kind of read the email he sent. He said, Brother Johnson, I think I've got my question. He said, 10 or 15 years from now, he's talking to you now, when you've had some time to put a bit of patina on the quote-unquote prestigious title of past master, what do you want to remember most this year? And he said the idea behind this question is introspection. He doesn't think anyone will want to remember the frustration or the stress, so they'll be forced to pay attention to those rewarding moments, no matter how infrequent they seem to come in the moment. Thanks again, Steve. What would that be? Like in 15 years, you look back at this year and you say, that's the one thing I remember the most.
Well, I think the one thing I'll remember the most is the camaraderie that we've had between myself and my wardens and some of the other guys in the lodge. That's what I want to remember the most. Hey, I want to say, hey, look back and go, it was fun hanging with those guys. It was, and I love those guys so much. Hopefully we'll be hanging together, 15 years from now, and that's, I'll be able to think back. Hey, remember when back in 2017 and we did that thing, and go back and say, hey, remember we were standing on the street in Fox River Grove and we were trying to give away turkeys for Christmas and Larry fell flat on his face in the snowbank. That's what I'm after. Those poignant memories of being and with your friends and your brothers and having a good time and having some laughs and at the same time doing something.
Yeah, I like that. I think too many times people start off with, I remember back in the good old days. And you know what? The good old days really were never good when you were living them. They become the good old days. Like right now will become the good old days at some point. And I think it's so important to pay attention to those kind of emotional, connected moments we have with other people, because ultimately that is something that we share. It's something that can't be described very well other than to say the way you think about your childhood and your best friends. And like when you watch a movie like Stephen King, wrote The Body, or as it's known as a film, Stand By Me, you look back and you see those kids playing and how tight they were, and you think it makes you feel something inside, like, man, I remember my friends. You get that same feeling as an adult, 5 or 6 years after something's happened in the past, in your lodge, when you think about your brothers. And I think it's really important to call that out. The way you talk about remembering it is beautiful. Thank you.
Oh, you're welcome. I think that's what it's all about, really.
Absolutely. So that's it. That's our 10 questions. But I want to say that I will see you at Grand Lodge this year. I'm going to see you down on the floor, and I'm going to see you and your boys getting that Award of Excellence.
Well, I'm moving out of the east, so my senior warden will go down and get it. But I'll be I'll be up there going, yes, we finally did it, and I'll get my lapel pin. And
there you go.
Then all will be right with the world.
That sounds great, and I look forward to it. And you mark my words, I'll find you at Grand Lodge this year. So. Everybody,
sounds good.
This has been 10 for 10, and I can't thank you, Worship Brother Andrew, for coming on the show and giving your perspective on these items.
This is my pleasure.
Noblesville, Indiana, population about 60,000 and growing, is the seat of Hamilton County, located about 25 miles north of Indianapolis. It's sort of a special place to me since I was born there. My father was a member of the town's Masonic Lodge, Noblesville 57. But this isn't about my father or me. It's about another member of Noblesville 57, a man named Earl Teeter, better known as Lucky. Earl Teeter was born in Noblesville in 1901. He was president of his high school class for 3 years, captain of the basketball team, a football player, and a champion boxer. Influenced by the world-famous race held just a few miles south of his home, the Indianapolis 500, Teeter was always attracted to thrills and action. So in 1934, he recruited a group of drivers and put an automobile show of thrills and spills on the road. He called this group of daredevils Lucky Teeter's Hell Drivers, the first use of the phrase many have used since. For the next several years, Lucky and his band of stunt drivers toured the country, playing to massive crowds with their ever-increasingly dangerous show. Teeter's fame and success mounted until everything changed on December 7, 1941. With the United States entering World War II, Teeter decided to close his show to help with the war effort. He planned one final performance, fittingly, on July 4, 1942. Wanting a grand finale, Lucky vowed to break the world record by jumping his car over a panel truck at a distance of 135 feet. In front of an excited sellout crowd at the Indianapolis Fairgrounds, he got in his car, jammed his foot on the accelerator, hit the launch ramp at full speed, and made the jump, setting the world record. Knowing this was a special day and his final performance before the war, Teeter had the ramps moved back to 140 feet, made another attempt, and set another world record. Ever the showman, he repeated the stunt at 145 feet. Having set 3 world records, he stepped to a microphone and told the crowd he would set one final record to honor the servicemen who now had the very future of the country in their hands. I want, he said, to thank the officers and soldiers. I'm dedicating this last stunt not only to the soldiers here, but to all those in Uncle Sam's armed forces throughout the world. With that, he had the distance set at 150 feet. Attempting his 4th world record of the day, he got into his car, fired the engine, and headed full tilt toward the launch ramp. Spectators reported they heard Teeter's bright yellow 1938 Plymouth misfire as he sped toward the jump. He didn't have nearly enough speed. Earl Teeter's luck ran out as his jump fell short and he lost his life. Today, Lucky Teeter remains one of Noblesville's favorite sons. Each year in August, the town hosts the Lucky Teeter Rebel Run. Proceeds go to what else? The Noblesville Masonic Angel Fund, in memory of a courageous brother whose final act was dedicated to the soldiers of World War II. For the Whence Came You podcast, this is Steve Harrison with the Masonic Minute.
Well, I hope you enjoyed the 10 for 10 and the excellent piece on Lucky from illustrious brother Stephen L. Harrison. If you like that, please check out wcypodcast.com and find the link for the bookstore where you can find books written by most of the guys who have been on our show, including Stephen L. Harrison. These books are available through Amazon.com, and of course, there's no affiliation with our show. It's just a place that I have put all the books that are written by people on the show or who have come on the show so that you guys can find them pretty easily and quickly. Of course, Steve is a great contributor to the Midnight Freemasons as well, and if you like that kind of stuff, please check out the midnightfreemasons.org. It's a great website. We've got great content. And if you like podcasts, please don't forget about the Masonic Roundtable going live every Tuesday at 10/9 Central. I was absent last week, and I do apologize. We had a great show lined up, but we had elections at the Cryptic Council chapter I'm in, and I got elected to thrice illustrious master, so that's exciting, but I was unable to make the meeting. Anyway, we're just a few episodes away now from episode number 300, so it's going to be a really big accomplishment. We really don't have any special plans for episode 300. We've been putting a lot of our special planning into the 300 event, so again, if you're curious about that, the MasonicRoundtable.com/300 or WCYPodcast.com, and just click on the link for 300 Years of Freemasonry. If you'd like to support this show, please consider doing so via our website and grabbing a pin. They're $10, and for $2 we ship anywhere in the United States. And we did have to go to an international shipping model because we were taking too big of a hit on that. So we were shipping anywhere in the world for $2, and we did that for 5 years. Now we are shipping anywhere in the world, and it does cost $15 because that is the average to send something. So those of you who have still purchased a pin or cufflinks or anything of that nature and have paid the extra shipping to go overseas, I thank you so much for help spreading our show and having a cool piece of Masonic flair for wherever you are in the world. But that's it for this week. Again, please check out our website, support the show when you can. We really appreciate it. It's what keeps this show on the air. So thanks again, and until next week, stay on the level. For Whence Came You, I'm Robert Johnson.
You've been listening to Whence Came You, a Masonic podcast featuring research papers and discussions related to Freemasonry with your host, Brother Robert Johnson. Be sure to join us for our next edition.